Welcome everyone to Conscious Conversations. I'm Lana Rose, your Conscious Concierge. Today, I'm so excited to have Kayla Gasparo with us to share her decade-long journey of misdiagnoses within the medical system. So Kayla and I actually went to college together, and we recently reconnected. And when she shared her story with me, I knew this was a story that I wanted to share with the world. So Kayla, I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I mean, this story has really turned into an element of purpose for me to really get it out there and inform people that this can happen. Because I didn't have that information available to me. So thank you for creating the space to do that. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Well, before we dive into the story, crazy story, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do now?
Yeah, so I'm a functional nutritionist, which means that I target the root cause of chronic illnesses, and I help people uncover what their specific root cause is. Everybody's is different, and I do that using functional lab testing. That's my specialty.
I love functional lab testing.
Yeah, it's helpful.
And getting to the root cause. That is so aligned with our mission at Conscious Concierge. Is really not just treating symptoms, but getting to the root cause, whether it's physical health, emotional health, mental health, all the above. So let's dive into your story. So why don't you tell us, walk us through that decade and really where it started. Did it start in high school or was it college that you started having the symptoms?
I got my breast implants for a happy graduation gift to myself. I thought it was going to be a positive thing, right? I mean, so back in college, I graduated in 2013. So I got these as a present for myself. I was about to move to Nashville and work in the entertainment industry. And I was like, I've always wanted them. This is how I want to show up in the world, is like my, my ideal body type and feeling my best. And that was the intention. So I went ahead and got breast augmentation that year. And then moved to Nashville. And I would say within a couple months, the symptoms started. So it was almost immediate for me. Wow.
What kind of symptoms did it start with?
So the first symptoms that I had, and mind you, I had never had mental health struggles before. It was just never something that I dealt with. So all of a sudden I started having really bad panic attacks. And I had never felt those before. I mean, you feel like you're dying and you can't breathe. It's crazy. And I started having them frequently. So they came on quick and they never went away, and they got more frequent and more severe. So that was the first thing that showed up for me. So, obviously, as you do, I went to a psychiatrist. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I guess I'm developing anxiety. So they start prescribing things. And, so that's kind of where my journey began, and things got a lot worse after that. So, if you want me to.
So that's so crazy. So in college, and usually it's a stressful time for somebody, and when anxiety can really kick in. So that wasn't your case. You got through college, and I remember you were like a super happy-go-lucky kind of chick. Yeah. And so after college, you started having these panic attacks, and you went to the psychiatrist, and they basically diagnosed you with what, like an anxiety disorder, depression?
Yeah. First it was panic disorder. Over time, things kept getting weirder. I mean, once you start taking medication, you don't really know if it's a side effect of the medication or if your actual condition is what's worsening. So it gets really confusing there. Yeah.
When you went to the psychiatrist, did they ask you really any questions about, I don't know, even childhood trauma or what you've experienced in your life, or or it was really just you have this disorder?
Yeah, it was more of a symptom checklist, check the box 1 to 5, how severe is your symptoms? They gather a list of your symptoms and prescribe a medication based on the symptoms that you've told them. They really didn't take into account, there wasn't a therapy session involved. They didn't really get to know who I was or what I was going through. And even if they did, to tell you the truth, they don't really have any other tools. They're still going to prescribe medication. So it's just kind of different roads that lead to the same destination.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm with you on that. Okay, so they diagnose you and they put you on what, SSRIs for a while.
I think the first thing that they did was like a benzo, like a Klonopin
Yeah.
situation,
Is
just to
that
use
it?
as needed. Yeah. So that was the first step. As things got worse, that didn't help. I mean, it would help in the moment, but ultimately the overall picture of my health was progressively getting worse. So that escalated. So it went from panic disorder, then we were talking generalized anxiety, then depression, um, OCD. There was just a lot of random symptoms that were popping up. And then ultimately, a few years later, I ended up getting a bipolar disorder diagnosis.
At
As
the time,
someone,
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as someone who has never struggled with mental health disorders
Mm,
before, has never dealt with these symptoms before, and then all of a sudden you're labeled with this diagnosis that becomes part of your identity. Like you start
hmm.
thinking, this is who I am now, this is what my life has become. And the only way that they tell you to treat it is with more medication. So,
Yeah. Wow. So at the time, it did it resonate with you to have these diagnoses, or you just really felt like this is just so strange, but I guess like this is what the doctors are telling me, so this is like must be what it is.
yeah, I mean, I didn't know any better than to do self research at that time. I just trusted the doctors because they were supposed to be experts, especially in what these symptoms that I was experiencing. And, I would do a little bit of Googling, and things that would come up would be the average onset of bipolar disorder is 25 years old. So
Yeah,
it wasn't that crazy to me, I guess, that,
right.
oh, maybe I'm developing this now. And this is just something that was going to come out later in life.
Wow. So in okay, so emotional and like mental symptoms
Yeah.
you were having, what else, like were you having physical symptoms as well?
Yeah. So the mental health stuff happened first. And just for the record, I didn't realize that breast implants are full of neurotoxins. So that is
Mhm.
where ultimately those symptoms come from. They cause neurotoxicity and inflammation in the brain. So that's why people have these really severe mental health symptoms when they get breast implants. But,
Mm,
other than that, like mental health wise, I had insomnia develop that was really bad. It was like
wow.
3 days straight, I would be awake and then I would sleep for 3 days. Like that was the pattern for some reason. So that symptom alone made it nearly impossible to hold a job. It was debilitating. It was taking up most of my time during the week, either being exhausted from not sleeping or sleeping too much. Um, so after those kind of mental health symptoms developed, I started getting symptoms of autoimmune, like some autoimmune condition that they couldn't necessarily put their finger on what it was, but
Yeah.
my my lab started looking autoimmune related. I started getting a lot of inflammatory markers that were rising. And then symptom wise, I had joint pain. I had chronic swollen lymph nodes, like all over my neck, all over like the upper part of my body and my collarbone. I had liver and
Wow.
kidney dysfunction that nurses would look at my labs and say, this is indicative of someone who's had a lifelong alcohol dependency. Like my liver
Uh,
enzymes were so severe. Um,
yeah.
I actually developed like a kidney tumor that grew to be twice the size of my actual kidney, invaded the kidney. I had to get like experimental surgery. Okay, like things got weird. Um,
Wow.
I, so other than that, autoimmune wise, I had Raynaud's that developed, which means like your hands and feet get really cold and like turn purple. Um, and then I developed chronic acne, like hormonal acne, chronic migraines, debilitating. And then I would get these, and these are really indicative of breast implant illness. People identify themselves a lot in this rash that develops all over your chest and all over the abdomen. So I want to make sure I mention
Wow.
that one
Yeah.
because it seems to be a very common symptom. And then I had just a lot of random stuff. I had what's called accelerated aging. So I had Botox at the time, but I still had these super deep forehead
Wow.
wrinkles. I looked 50 years old. It was just like,
Wow.
because of all this oxidative stress it's causing in the body, it truly accelerates aging.
Wow.
Yeah. Constant brain fog, noise sensitivity that was like everything was so loud. I was constantly overstimulated. And then I gained 70 pounds in like 6 months, like all at
What?
once.
70
Rapid,
pounds?
rapid weight gain.
Wow.
And, doctors told me you're getting older, your hormones are changing. And I wasn't doing anything different. And I had always looked the same. I always had the same body type. So I was just flabbergasted. Like I didn't know what was happening. It was crazy.
I mean,
Hmm.
that's so crazy. And that just must have taken such a toll. Like, I don't know. I mean, I personally have experienced what it feels like to just have these like unknown symptoms and, obviously my journey with birth control and parasites and things like toxins in the body. But 10 years of such like severe symptoms like that is enough to make anyone go crazy. So I can only imagine how isolating that probably felt. I mean,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, chronic illness is very isolating because
yeah,
friendships in general need to be two ways. And when you are like just kind of
yeah,
overwhelmed with all of your own health stuff going on, you can't really
yeah,
contribute and be there for other people because you're in survival mode. You're in self preservation mode all the time. And then you can't even keep
yeah,
plans most of the time because you don't know which days you're going to wake up and feel awful. So, yeah, it's a very isolating situation.
yeah, it really is. And I mean, it's just so crazy because, like, obviously the doctors are doing the best they can, right? They're trying to figure it out and they have the tools that they have. And so much of the traditional medical landscape, they're not really looking at the root cause. They're looking for like those symptoms and treating them. And so they are treating the symptoms, but there's clearly just so many of them. They probably just didn't know like what else
Yeah,
to
and you're
do.
you're you're really never talking to the same person twice either. You go to
Yeah.
one the story of living
Yeah.
with a chronic illness is you knock on one door, they can help with a certain amount of the symptoms, they'll give you medication, but then they'll send you a different specialist who can help with this
Totally.
other group of symptoms. Like
Yeah.
no one looks at the body as one thing, as a whole
Yeah.
component.
Yeah.
We treat all these parts differently when they're all interconnected. So that never really made sense to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, except functional medicine. They
Yeah.
look at the whole body.
Yes.
No, really though. But wow. So okay, so you're I mean, trying to go through your life in your 20s, right? Working and maintaining a job. And I mean, at that point, did you have to give up your goal of singing and being in Nashville and all of that?
Yeah. I mean, I would start job. Yeah. I ended up having to leave Nashville, I would say 6 months after I got there. I
Wow.
got a job working for Sony Music straight out of graduation. I think I got in the car the
Mhm.
next day and drove straight there, just like bursting at the
Wow.
seams, so excited to start my life. And
Yeah.
yeah, I moved a number of times too because I never really wanted to move back to Pittsburgh. It was never really in my plan. But so many
Yeah.
times my symptoms would get so severe, I literally couldn't take care of myself. So I would have to move home, move closer to my parents, where, yeah, it was debilitating. I mean, I was applying for disability at one point because I couldn't hold a job and there was no way to get income. Yeah, it was
Wow.
bad. Hmm.
That's so wild. And so, okay, so you have all these symptoms. You're going doctor to doctor,
Yeah,
trying to get to the root of it, treating each symptom as it comes, right? Probably losing your mind and clearly having to move home to family to help
yeah,
take care of you in your young 20s, mid 20s at this point,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So when did you even put it together that it could be the implants? And like, who was the person? Was it just you having this insight on your own, or did somebody really point it out to you?
Yeah, no. I had never made a correlation through all of the research I've done on my own, all the doctors that I had seen who knew my medical history. never once did someone draw a correlation for me between autoimmune symptoms and an autoimmune reaction to a foreign body that was inside of me, which you think would be the first thing you would look at. But no, so I remember one day I used to frequent at the ER because I was just having all these really severe outbreaks of things. Sometimes I would be there 3 times in 1 week, just trying to figure out what to do. Right. Because it takes a while to get a hold of a specialist. So you can't just like a new symptom comes up and you go see the doctor the next day. You usually have to wait like 3 to 6 months to see somebody. So yeah, I would end up in the ER all the time. They like knew me. And so I went in one time because I think the symptoms at that point, I was having stroke symptoms. Like I was having kind of like a Bell's palsy, disoriented vision, like a numb arm, truly stroke symptoms. And then I was bleeding out of my mouth. Like I was spitting up, sounds so intense, but I was spitting up blood. And I thought I was having a stroke. Like I had no idea. So I went in, they gave me Xanax, they gave me Benadryl, and they sent me home. I was used to this, right? I just wanted to make sure that nothing serious was happening. So I went home, and in like a desperate attempt at this point to get some answers, I just created a Facebook post that was like, has anyone ever heard of these symptoms? My nurse and doctor friends, like, have you heard of this? Because I'm not getting any answers and it's scaring me. So one of our friends from college, actually, I don't know if Lindsay Vernon. I don't know if I'm allowed to say her name.
Yeah. Was she a nurse?
Yeah. No, but she messaged me on the side and said, hey, I have a friend do you have breast implants? Because I had a friend who went through something almost exactly sounding like what you're going through. She had implants, and when she had them removed, everything went away. So I wanted to know
good old LV to the rescue.
She truly like saved my life.
Wow,
so
go Lindsay.
I know. Like I still to this day I tell her all the time, like you saved me. Without that information, it was divine intervention. So
totally. Wow. So it was her that sparked the like, okay, I have that. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. So she connected me with her friend. She gave me a resource. It's a Facebook page called Breast Implant Illness and Healing by Nicole, which is a really great resource if anybody is listening and wants to do some research or is hearing themselves in this, in these symptoms and wants to learn more. It's basically an online forum with like 150,000 women who are all going through this at once and are helping each other through it because there's no resources. There's no doctors really who specialize other than a few plastic surgeons at this point. So everyone's just kind of collaborating and trying to share resources and walking each other through it. So there's searchable terms in this forum. So I started searching all my symptoms and I was like, this is me. Like every single person's story that came up, I was like, this is me. So that day I started researching explant surgeons. And there's a list of approved explant surgeons on Nicole's website. It's called Breast Implant Illness and Healing, I think, .com, something like that. Or breast implant. Let me double check. Breast implant healer. Hang on. I think it's called, breast implant healing breast implant illness.com.
Wow.
Yeah. So healingbreastimplantillness.com. And they have a list of explant surgeons that they approve of that can do this correctly. Yeah.
Amazing. So did you reach out to
everyone?
You're like, so you just,
well, I went down the list. I was like, I'll go to Florida. I'll go to California. I'll go wherever I need to go. Who can take me first?
So you didn't even know if this was going to do it, but you were just, you just felt so sure in the body that you were like, this is what it is, that you were just like, I'm taking them out. There's no question.
I had gone through so much medically and tried, literally exhausted everything that they had to offer me. So if there was even a chance that this procedure could literally save my life, then I was going to try. And
how old were you at that point?
That was 2019. So, almost 7 years later. This had gone on for a really long time.
So you're almost 30. You went almost all of your 20s dealing with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, most of my young life, like where you're supposed to be in your prime, I was, battling a really serious chronic illness that no one really knew that I was dealing with.
Yeah, because you didn't even know you were dealing with it.
Right. No one knew
I
really
mean,
what was
it's
going on.
so wild. I have, it's so weird how when we reconnected, because when you told me about it, I was like, I've like started to hear about this, but it was like just getting on my radar.
Yeah.
And so when you shared your story, I was like, wow, I mean, this is, I mean, so many people have breast implants, and obviously not to say that this is going to affect everybody, right? Like it's just for the people that are having the reaction to it.
Right.
So, okay, so you find a doctor and you went to have that procedure done.
First, mistakenly, I went back to the surgeon who put them in. And I was like,
Okay.
I think I figured out all the, and
And she's like,
he's still
get
putting them
out.
in. It's the bread and butter of his business. I was like, you need
Yeah.
to take these out. They're making me sick,
Mhm.
and as they do so often in the medical industry, just gaslit me. Like the amount of gaslighting that I endured throughout this whole process was like
Yeah.
one of some of the worst parts. Just going and feeling
Yeah.
like your intuition is telling you how to fix
Yeah.
this, and a doctor is saying you're crazy.
Yeah.
Um, you
I've
know,
experienced it in a much smaller way with the birth control, like the
right?
bloating and the mental health. It's not that, it's not that, it's not that. And then, that's what's so key about strengthening the inner voice and like the inner compass, because like we know and our body knows above any doctor and any person in the world, and no fault of theirs sometimes. It's just that like
No,
our body and we know and our soul knows for us. We know our
yeah,
truth. So good thing you listened to that. So you left
yeah,
his office and he
yeah.
said no, basically.
Well, I went into his office. I said, I think is there ever a situation where people get these out and these autoimmune symptoms resolve? And he said, you're the second person. I've been in practice for 40 years. You're the second person who has ever come in with any of these symptoms. And I'm going to tell you the truth. You need to save yourself a surgery. It's not, that is like the quote that I carry with me in my head. Save yourself a surgery, because you're not going to like the way that you look with them out. You're going to have them put back in, and having them out's not going to help anyway. So you're going to spend a bunch of money. It's not going to help. And you're going to then have to spend 10 grand more to get them back in because you're not going to like the way you look.
Wow.
So, and that's from a professional. That's someone who puts these in every day. But I knew at that point my intuition was screaming at me like
Yeah.
he's wrong. So
Yeah.
I stormed out. I forgot my keys. I had to go back in. I stormed out twice.
I'm back.
I'm back.
Still
I'm
pissed.
still pissed leaving. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
It's tough. Yeah, I hear
right.
these stories all the time in different ways. And
Yeah.
again, like not to shame or fault anybody, but just really to bring awareness to
Yeah.
for people to really develop that inner voice, because that's the voice that's going to bring us into alignment and
Yeah.
find our truth. So
It
you
saved my
leave,
life.
and what happens from there?
So I ended up going down the list of approved surgeons, right? I started
Okay.
calling. I think I did 10 consultations until I just felt like I vibed with the person, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term, that I was speaking to. They were, for the first time in 10 years, they validated everything I was saying. They said the symptoms are absolutely connected. They knew how to do the proper removal, which is called an en bloc procedure, which means that they also can remove the scar capsule around it all in one piece. Because if they don't, usually on imaging, they'll check for rupture, but a lot of the times it doesn't show up on imaging.
Yeah.
So they have to be able to take this scar capsule out around it in one piece, or else it can open and the silicone can leak out and kind of go throughout the body. So we don't want that. We don't want
Wow.
any silicone
Yeah.
left behind. Yeah.
Wow. There's only one other person I knew. One of my close friends growing up, her mom had a stroke and she died. And it was the only time I ever heard of someone dying from breast augmentation. But for her, it ended up leaking and she had a stroke in her brain. And
Oh
so, yeah,
my.
that was like the very first time I heard, but that was like an older procedure. And so
Mhm.
the way they would do it. And so I didn't think, there was ever any issues with it again until hearing your story. But
Well, you know what's interesting is through my story and my recovery, my mom actually realized that she also had breast implant illness. She had breast cancer when I was growing up, when I was in my teens. They put implants in for reconstruction because she had the double mastectomy.
yeah, my
She
mom
went through,
too.
yeah, she went through 3 pairs of them because they were exploding in her chest over and over
Wow.
again. Her body was just rejecting them. And she ended up developing lupus, which they told her that after chemo, that's, a common thing that happens. But once she saw me recover, she was like, I wonder if my autoimmune condition is tied to my implants. So she got hers out
Wow.
a couple years later. And for the first time in 20 years, I think 2 months after she explanted, all of her inflammatory markers were back to normal for the first time in 17
Wow.
years.
Wow. So, okay. So that's so crazy.
Crazy.
Okay, so you get the explant,
Yeah.
you get them taken out, you had someone do it the right way, make sure to
Yeah.
remove all of it, like you were saying. From there, when you woke up that next day, were you like, this was the right decision? Like, this was what I needed, and you just knew? And when did you start to see your symptoms go away?
Lana, when you wake up from that surgery and you have breast implant illness, everyone has kind of the same story,
Mm,
right? You can breathe for the first time. Like you don't realize how restricted your breath is when you have this weight on your chest. Your eyes, like they say on the website to take a picture of your eyes before and after, because before they're like the whites of your eyes are darker. And when you wake up from the surgery, they're bright white. Like your body is just, its health is restoring all at once. And you have this new
wow.
vitality that you can see in the eyes. And for me, I woke up from that surgery. And what I remember the most is I felt effortlessly happy. I felt the emotion of joy that was
Mm,
mine. And it wasn't from medication for the first time in almost 10 years.
wow. So you had like an immediate
Yeah.
reaction, like an immediate lift of the symptoms.
Immediate.
Wow. And
Yep.
so walk us through the years after that. Like, was it just smooth sailing from there on out? And really like, then you went and told your mom. And so she went down the path, like, walk us through all of that.
Yeah, so the detoxification process is long and there's
Mm,
no one there to guide you through it. Again, doctors don't understand this. Very few holistic practitioners really understand this at this point. So I just
yeah.
had to guide myself through it. So what's crazy is all of your symptoms disappear at once when you get the surgery. And then a couple weeks later, you're scared to trust that this is really your answer anyway. But a couple
Yeah.
weeks later, you start getting these detox waves, and everybody gets them.
Hmm.
And all of your symptoms come back at once. For me, it was 2 weeks
Wow.
later, was my first one. All of them at their most severe, in their most severe presentation, they come back at once, right? So you go through these detox waves. They usually last about 3 days to a week of all your symptoms being back. They're angry. You're like, I mean, for me, I was like, okay, this didn't do it. I had temporary relief. That was nice, but I'm still sick. I'm always going to be sick. And over
Mm,
time, the detox waves go away. You have no symptoms again. It's very confusing. But over time, the the time between detox waves gets longer. So it could be 3 months before you have another one. The severity gets
wow.
less. And then every single one that you have, you'll notice, like, you want to keep a list of symptoms because you'll start to notice that they start to fall away one by one, truly. And, only a few will come back for every detox wave. So it changes. It's very confusing.
Wow. So you start detoxing out, and at that point you were like getting a little nervous, like, okay, did this work, type of
Yeah.
thing. When did
You
you become sure that this was just a detox wave, since there isn't a lot of info? Oh, but you had the support group at least, so that was good.
you have the support group, right? And they're saying there's detox waves, they exist. So you kind of have a little bit of reassurance, even though it's really scary.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think it took over a year to trust that all my symptoms were really going to go away for good. Because, once my toxic load, so to speak, lessened, all the medication that I was on, I still never made the correlation that the bipolar and the implants
Yeah.
could be related. Never. I
Mm.
was like, I just
At
have
that point.
yeah, at that point. But over time, the medications that I was on, which were also so debilitating in their own way, like all the side effects
Yeah.
were crazy, but
Yeah.
they started feeling way too strong. And because like I didn't have as much toxicity, I didn't need as much. My gut was probably repairing, so my absorption was better, all of the above, right? So
Yeah.
at so I started having to wean off some of it just because it was so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Um, and then I started realizing, oh, I don't need this anymore. So as I came off the medication, I really came back to myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
my emotions started feeling like mine again, because it's weird. Like
Yeah.
medication makes you wake up. I was on stuff to wake up. I was on stuff to go to
Yeah.
sleep. I was on stuff to make me happy, to relax me, to make me focus. Like so much medication. So all of a sudden I was
Yeah.
like, this is who I've always been. This is how I've always felt in my body.
Yeah.
And it was such a beautiful homecoming for me, truly.
Mm. I love that. That's, I mean, yeah, I hear that a lot about when people were just on so much medication to wake up, to sleep, to feel joy, like to calm down. I mean, I've definitely had my fair share back in the day, of medications to do all those things as well, particularly to calm down, to wake up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like you just feel like the veil is lifted and you can really start to understand what people mean when they say things like having an intuition. Like I didn't even know what an intuition was.
Right.
So it's probably so beautiful for you to feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, when it really comes down to it, these symptoms as they're described, right? Your anxiety, depression, all your mental symptoms are communicators. They're like sacred communication that's trying to ask for help. It's saying your
So
body's
true.
saying, I need something from you. I'm lacking something from you. And that communication is just going to get louder and louder. And if we cover it up with medication,
Mhm.
the body will find another way to express itself, right? So,
Yes.
yeah, it felt really good to that when I got anxiety, I knew that there was a reason for it because it wasn't just a side effect of medication or, a
Yes.
symptom based on toxicity. It was because I was with someone that shouldn't feel good to be around.
Hmm.
I should probably get away from them. Like, normal
Yeah.
triggers of anxiety that you should listen to. So,
I loved what you said about sacred communicators. I always say that like if you don't listen to the whispers, they'll turn into screams.
yeah.
And yeah, that word sacred communicators is so true. It's like we're experiencing these symptoms for a reason, whether we're in the wrong environment, we're with the wrong person, we're not aligned in the right job that's for our, aligned with our soul, or we have a toxin in the body. Um, they are yelling at us to pay attention and listen. And like you said, they will find whatever way.
Yep.
But I think the problem right now with the world of pharmas is this over prescribing of people, and so they're just quieting the symptoms, rightfully so they can try to like live a normal life, but
Right.
then they're missing a lot of the gifts that these sacred communicators bring.
Yeah. And if you really think about it, I like to say this a lot to my clients. You don't have anxiety because you have a Xanax deficiency. You don't have depression because you have an SSRI deficiency. These are not things that our body needs. It helps with symptoms, but ultimately it's asking for something, a building block of some sort, a component of self that is missing,
Mm,
right? So,
yes, so true. So understand what you're saying, and have experienced it. So I very much understand. And I mean, what a severe way to experience that though for so many years.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure obviously at this point you now understand like why you had to go through that journey, and now you, you know, are doing what you're doing and probably helping a lot of people, right? To find the root cause and what's toxic in their body. So at what point in the journey did you stop what you were doing, like career wise, and start doing this to help people?
Yeah. So after I explanted and realized what was going on and realized that there was no resources for people like me who had been researching for years, the first step
Mm.
was I wrote up my story, like an an autobiographical piece. I pitched it to every news. I thought the news would be interested in this, but
You would
I
think.
I
They're
pitched it.
like, stuff it down.
I know. They're like, no, we're censoring you.
They're
But
like, shh.
but it did get picked up by Medical News Today, which is a pretty big site. They published my story. And from that, I started
Amazing.
getting inundated with messages on my Facebook from women who were like, help. Like, I saw myself in this story. I think that's what's going on with me. Are you feeling better? Like, what happened? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I started coaching people for free just once I published that story and people started asking for help. I wouldn't say it was till maybe a couple years later when I was off all my medication, lost 70 pounds in 6 months, by the way, because it was pure inflammation, side effects from all the antidepressants and
Wow.
all that. It
Oh my God,
fell off my body,
a moment
right?
for that. That's so powerful.
I changed nothing. I changed nothing about my diet, my exercise routine. It was inflammatory. It was crazy. So, all right, at that point I started realizing like even if it's not breast implants for people, if you
Yeah.
have toxicity happening in the body, right? Whether it's like pathogens or mold or like heavy metals, breast implants, whatever.
Hmm.
Once you can get to the root of what that toxicity is, it can be emotional, it can be stress, like those things are toxic elements. Once you can identify what that is and remove it, the body knows how to heal itself. It was like an incredible revelation for me. So at that point I was like, this is what I want to teach people to do. So I ended up going back to grad school. I did a few certifications first to like dip my toe in, but I really wanted to work with like really chronic, complicated cases and give them some answers. So I went back to graduate school for that, just so I had all the tools I needed.
Wow. I
Mhm.
mean, that's amazing. I feel like, as much as we can study these subjects, I always say there's nothing better than actually experiencing it yourself, because like we can have sympathy when when we've never experienced it for someone, but we can't have empathy. And
Right.
so to be able to really empathize with somebody because you've been there and you've been in dealing with those symptoms and you've
Mhm.
healed yourself. I mean, who better to help women dealing with that?
And to really be a vessel of hope for people, because in your, like, I know in my heart that I can help someone heal from pretty much anything. So
Yeah.
that what they're going through, there's going to be answers, there's going to be improvement. And I can say that with certainty. So I think to
Mm.
provide that to somebody who's feeling lost and hopeless and just helping them feel heard. Like, the medical community does not listen. So to have someone come in and you just listen and validate what they're saying, it's a huge part of the healing process for anybody. So
Yeah.
just to be able to provide that
Yeah.
is helpful.
It's so important to, I always talk about this about having, people that really understand like the mind, body, and spirit connection, because they are connected. And so when we just don't have somebody helping heal us or helping guide us, or, a professional we're going to see, and they don't understand like that connection, it's really challenging.
It's so helpful to have a guide, like somebody who,
Yeah.
can look at things from that
Yeah.
perspective.
That's really why we offer, all of that at Concierge, is like I really only partner with people that have that full understanding so that they can really help people, whatever they're dealing with, to really be able to connect the dots, because without that connection, it's just, we're not getting the full picture. I think
Right.
that's what's missing in the medical world, is like this, they're missing the spirit and the soul and all of that.
I think you can have as much training as you want, and you can have as many years of schooling as you want, and that's helpful in a way. But this process put me through a spiritual awakening when I was like in the dark,
1000%.
in the dark night of the soul, on my
Yeah.
own most of the
Yeah.
time. I didn't really have energy for much, so I meditated a lot. I started,
Mhm.
I started all these spiritual practices that kept me hopeful. And,
Yeah.
so this experience, although it was awful, it woke me up. And once you get woken
Yeah.
up to the medical industry, it's a tower effect for sure. Um,
Yeah. You get woken up
but
to everything else.
it all happens pretty quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think the awakening in itself was probably brought me to my purpose quicker than any schooling that I did.
It 1000% does. It
Yeah.
1000% does. And why we're having that conversation, both on my end as well. But I mean, I think also those spiritual tools that you use, those probably really helped you build the intuition, because when you meditate and when you're doing those other practices, it's really helping you build the muscle of like, what is my truth? Because we're able to quiet the mind and really get into the body, which is where the truth is. So
100%.
that's
If it wasn't for, I've always been like a strong-willed chick my whole life, but if it wasn't for my intuition being so persistent, everyone around me was saying, don't do that surgery. It's not going to work. It's not going to help. And I, luckily my intuition was louder. So I found my answers. And that's really the only way that you get through something like that, is by tuning in and honing in on that skill.
wow. So then, okay, so now you are helping so many people through this. I mean, first of all, now I guess to backtrack, getting off the emotional medications, like the mental health medications, like that must have been a whole other journey in itself. So you started feeling really in touch with yourself, feeling like, wow, this was really like listening to myself
Yeah.
was really what was best. Did you ever contact that doctor back?
No, I don't think that is a message that he could have heard anyway.
Mm,
I've talked to a number
sure.
of doctors since then who have been like, I'm glad that worked for you, but you're one person. So that's not going to work for everybody. You know what I mean? So it wasn't, it's like my testament didn't hold that much weight for them.
Mm, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that it did heal you. And I'm sure now you probably feel amazing getting your life back and then going on to live your purpose, and awakening usually brings us to that. So we're always grateful for those brutal awakenings. But,
Yeah. I mean,
and
it
now
was,
you're helping your
yeah.
mom.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. My mom has gone into remission after almost 20 years of lupus.
Wow.
So healing her has been like, I could cry. Like one of the most
Yeah.
beautiful parts of this for me, just because she's given me so much through my journey that then I can turn around and give healing back to her, really meant a lot to me.
Wow. My
Yeah.
God. I can only imagine. I mean, your parents really took care of you during that time, right? You said?
I
And they must
needed,
have been so
yeah.
scared and confused.
I remember my mom would come over a couple times a week just because I didn't have the energy. Like my fatigue was so chronic. At the height of my illness, I was probably getting 2 hours out of my day. I would wake up at noon and I would say to myself, just get to 2 o'clock and you can go back to bed. So my life was, my quality of life was very low. But my mom would come over, she would clean my house, she would do my dishes because they would just be overflowing. I just couldn't do, she would tell me to take a shower. Like truly, I couldn't do basic things to take care of myself for a very long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So wild, and such a beautiful full circle moment to be able to help your mom like that. I
Yeah.
mean, it just gives people hope. I really always try to share like these moments that like bring you to your knees. Like when you stick with it and really keep going, like there is a gift there.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
seem like it, but there is a gift when you really keep pushing through the dark night of the soul.
The dark night of the soul is gnarly. And, there's the way that I always describe this is there was this kind of like voice in my head the whole time that was saying, this is never going to end for you. This is not the quality of life you want. like, but this is your life now. Like, are you sure you want to deal with this? Like, kind of just, but to me, I always heard that voice as other. Like, it wasn't mine, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, but I knew not to listen to it, basically, because there was an answer. I knew there was an answer, and I just kept, every day was just, I would approach that day, and that was my job. And yeah, you really have to just take it in small increments like that, because it gets overwhelming.
Yeah, it really does. Well, wow, what a beautiful story. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for
of
sharing. I'm so
course.
happy. I hope this reaches so many people
Me too.
um, that maybe are searching for an answer. And really just to bring awareness that, we always know what's best for us, no matter what we're being told or what anybody says, whatever their degree may be. And so, yeah, to keep fighting, to keep following it. So thank you so much
Of
for
course.
sharing.
Yeah. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for having me. I hope that this reaches some people that need to hear it. And anyone can reach out to me if you need resources, guidance on this. I'm here to help. So,
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say for anyone interested, what is your Instagram so people can reach out to you?
yeah, it's Natural Way with K is my Instagram. And then Kayla Gasparo on Facebook. I'm still like,
Mm.
I'm still going back to those messages because people are finding. I'm the only person with
Oh,
Facebook still, but
I
people are
love
finding me
that.
that way. So,
Yeah. Oh my God, amazing. And then obviously, as always, if you're interested in exploring your mental, physical, emotional health and what your options are, please reach out to at Your Conscious Concierge or go to www.yourconsciousconcierge.com.